Hi guys, welcome back to the Far Southwest podcast. I hope you're all doing well and thank you for coming today. For today's episode, I will be talking about a learning module that I learned last week in a discussion for class that was about facial recognition. I will also be talking about the, excuse my pronunciation, de Point de Lignos family. Towards the end of this episode, I will also be discussing about the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, who was killed in Manhattan recently. So now I will be talking about the discussion that I had learned last week based off of facial recognition. Basically, facial recognition is a system that runs off of people's faces of anyone who's ever been in the system. So let's say, for example, if they have a picture of someone from a surveillance video that they could use to be able to trace that person's face if it's in the system. Or sometimes the system is able to catch all the unique features off of one's face, so it will be able to narrow down to one person easier. Or sometimes the police provide pictures or a video to the news, and the news will release and talk about whatever crime's been committed by the person or people, and they will show the faces in the video to counties and stuff to see if someone will be willing to come forth and say that they know this person, so they're able to arrest this person for whatever crime that was committed. Also, for the discussion, I did this activity where our professor provided us a website for us to use. It was basically 2 different tests for us to do where it runs like a simulation and you can stop it at any point, and it just gives you a completely random face and you can look over the face and try and recognize it, and then once you click ready, it just restarts and it makes the canvas blank basically, and they have all these different buttons where you can select from the features that you remember by memory. By my personal experience, I had fun with this website and I did an overall good job, except for the second test. Kind of had a hard time telling the difference between 2 different features because they looked very much the same on the website, but I was able to do good. Overall, this was a good website to use to learn about facial recognition. I also see how important facial recognition is and how it can be extremely helpful sometimes during some situations. So it's good to remember someone's face, just depending on the situation. I will now start talking about the crime case that I chose for this episode. Fair warning, I do apologize in advance if I botch their last names or their name very badly. Today we're going to talk about the de Point de Lignos family disappearance / murder case. I'm going to give you some background information before we get started on what happened to this family. This was a family of 6 who lived in Nantes, France. As you can see in the picture, on the left side is the father Xavier de Point de Lignos, the youngest daughter Anne, and the youngest son Benoit. On the right side of the picture is the mother Agnes de Point de Lignos, and then I believe it's above her the oldest son Arthur, and then the second oldest Thomas. And from what I was able to find about this family online and through some articles, is that they seem like nice people and they had many talents of their own. So I'm going to start with some of the actions that were taking place before the disappearance and the murder of this family. So the lease to their house was terminated. All of their bank accounts got closed. When police had entered the house, it looked somewhat empty, no one was living there, or they were moving out, the children's final payment was made to their schools. Xavier, the father, had bought cement and a shovel. So then moving on to March of 2011, Xavier had bought rifle bullets and had registered at a local shooting range that was north of Nantes. His sons were also starting to learn how to shoot since they were going with their dad. Later in the month of March, Xavier had gone to the store, which was located in central France, which is about 200 miles away from Nantes. A quick reminder, that's like a 3.5-hour drive just to go to a DIY store to get large bin liners and a box of adhesive paving slabs that were plastic. Then we transitioned into the month of April of 2011, where Arthur had left college, where he was attending to at the time, and he was planning on showing up to the pizzeria that he used to work at to pick up his paycheck that he would pick up every first day of the month. But he did not show up at all, and his boss thought it was very odd since he would do that regularly, and his boss found it to be very odd because it did not sound like something he would do. The next day, Xavier had bought 4 bags of lye from different stores. Each bag of lye that he bought were about 200 pounds each. And on the 3rd of April, the family and the 3 children went out to go eat together, and then they went to the movies together. Later, a neighbor said that they saw Agnes for the last time and saw Xavier putting quote-unquote large bags into his car. At 10:37 p.m., he had left a message to his sister Christine describing what him and his family did that day, and then he talked about his brother-in-law Brenham. Then he says, quote-unquote, "Anyway, sending you my love. If it's not too late, call me back or send me a text and I'll call you. Okay, I'm going to put the kids to bed. Say hi to everyone. See you soon. Maybe." After that, the 2 younger ones did not turn up to school the next day since it was quote-unquote due to illness, and both the children's friends became concerned when they were not able to reach Anne or Benoit. But their friends also heard a rumor of them moving to Australia since their dad had gotten a job opportunity that was given to him, but they did not know when they were going to leave to Australia, and Anne and Benoit never explained further on this possible moving to Australia. Later, Xavier had called his sister for about 20 to 30 minutes, and she said, quote-unquote, everything seemed normal. At 9 p.m., him and Thomas went to go eat at a high-end restaurant in France, which Thomas would order a sea bass with tomato juice, and his dad would order a tasty menu with a half bottle of red wine. 2 of the waiters at that high-end restaurant recalled Thomas feeling ill towards the end of his meal, which him and his father barely spoke to each other during the entire meal. Some investigators believe, or they speculate, that he killed his wife and his 3 children during the 3rd or the 4th of April, and then killed his son Thomas on the evening of April 5th. The next day, a bailiff came to the family home to collect a debt of 20,000 euros, but no one answered, and then the neighbors were stating that they saw Agnes on the 5th or the 7th of April in front of the house on the phone, and some of the neighbors even spoke to her, or they saw her walking one of the dogs that they had. Also, forensic scientists were unable to narrow down what day Agnes had passed away, since it wasn't really specific on what some of the stuff they were able to get. Thomas's ex-girlfriend also brought up to investigators about April 4th, since he was talking to her through his friend's computer on an online forum of some sort, since He told her he was planning on staying with some friends at that exact same house that he was with until his dad called him and told him to come home since his mom had been in a quote-unquote cycling accident. Tommen's friends recall him leaving at 10 p.m. to take a train back home. After that, he became very vague towards his friends on text. Then he stopped answering their texts altogether. Arthur's girlfriend became increasingly concerned with the fact that she was unable to get in touch with him for days now, which she had gotten to the family home and knocked on the door, which the two labs did not bark, which she found unusual because they bark a lot whenever someone comes to the door. And to add to the fact of the dogs, that the neighbors were hearing these two Labradors howling for 2 days and nights straight, and suddenly they just became silent and they never heard them again. On the 7th of April, many neighbors, like I said before, had reported seeing Xavier taking multiple trips into his car with large black bags. And the same day is where neighbors were conflicted about seeing Agnes on this day or on the 5th of April. The last known record of activity was Xavier going onto a Catholic forum that was online, and he was emailing his brother-in-law saying, "Everything's fine, Brenham. You'll hear more detailed news soon through Christine. Bye for now. All the best, Xavier." Then a message went to Xavier's mother and sister, but it was sent under Xavier's IP address, and the family lawyer possibly thinks that it was a letter written under distress and he may have killed himself or he was murdered. From the events of April 11th to April 15th, there was a whole lot that happened with the disappearance of this family and some of the letters that came in as well. A letter was sent to Anne's and Benoit's school from their father saying that they are unenrolling from school because they are moving to Australia due to quote-unquote urgent professional changes, and it was signed by Xavier. Then the Catholic school that Agnes worked at also received a signed letter, but from Agnes saying that she will be resigning for the same reason as stated in the letter that her children's school got. And the boss was trying to get a hold of her, which he found very odd that he couldn't. Then Xavier's immediate family gets an unsigned letter from Xavier explaining what's going on and how him, his wife, and his kids would be going under the Federal Witness Protection Program and will be out of touch for a few years. He tells them the location that they're probably going to be at, which I believe it said the United States. He gives advice to his relatives to keep telling the press a rumor of them going to Australia, even though they're not going to be there at all, but at the other location. He advised them on this because no one is supposed to know about them going to the Eyewitness Protection Program. But since he was basically telling his relatives to spread this rumor of them going to Australia, hopefully the news articles and stuff about them disappearing would just slowly die down, and that's when they'll reconnect again. For the next couple of days, Xavier was staying at hotels in southern France since he was using his credit card constantly at different hotels and was going by the alias name of Mr. Laurent Xavier. But while this was going on at the same time, neighbors were also getting extremely concerned, and they contacted the police since the shutters of the home that they lived in had been closed for more than a week, and Agnes' car had just been parked there outside the house the entire time untouched. Then Xavier got caught on surveillance video of a hotel he stayed at last. He checked out the next day and then abandoned his car there. That surveillance video was the last known sighting of him, and to add to the fact that the police were also starting to investigate the family's home since there were so many concerns from neighbors. That's when on April 21st a wanted notice was made for this family, so the police were able to go onto the property and try and see what they can find about what's going on with his family and why they're not answering or basically being unresponsive. They do find the remains of Agnes and the 4 children and the 2 labs that were mentioned earlier underneath the back garden patio. They did do autopsies on the family, and what came up is that they were drugged before they were shot while they slept. They were killed with a .22 long rifle, which coincidentally Xavier had the same weapon within his collection that he had inherited from his father 3 months prior to the murders. Xavier's relatives were also advised not to see the bodies, which led his relatives to believe that it really was not Agnes and the children if they weren't allowed to see them. On the 28th of April, a funeral was held, and after the funeral, they were all cremated. Soon after, there was an international arrest for Xavier. In 2015, there was bones discovered with a survival camp scene, as it was described. There was glasses, an empty wallet, a sleeping bag, a magazine, a lighter, and a bill dating from 2011. But there was a medical pin in the forearm, which is known that Xavier does not have a medical pin in his forearm, but it is speculated that Xavier could have possibly been operated after his disappearance. To this day, Xavier has never been found, at all. Overall, I found this case very interesting and strange in a way. But if you want to look further into this case, then I highly recommend going to Netflix and watching Unsolved Mysteries. And you should be able to find the episode called House of Terror. I think it's the first season. For today's current event, I will talk about the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. He is the one on the left of the picture, and the suspect is on the right. On September 4th, someone in a mask shot Brian Thompson outside of the Midtown Manhattan Hotel. This became a big shock to everyone, because who would shoot down a CEO of an insurance company? Even with the citywide manhunt to find this masked man who killed Thompson, it is still unknown what the suspect's name is, but police have been able to trace the suspect to arriving 10 days prior in Manhattan, and they were able to trace his whereabouts, which the photo that I have shown now is the suspect walking around town. The suspect was staying at a hotel, and once he checked back in the next day, on the November 30th, he had used a fake New Jersey ID. Considering that Thompson was in the busiest and most highly surveillance neighborhood, people are questioning, why is it taking them so long to find a suspect? Considering the fact that this is the most busiest time of the year with many tourists and shoppers, how can one not see the suspect? That is one of the many things that people are questioning the police right now. As of right now, Mayor Eric Adams has come forward onto the show called Morning Joe, discussing about the recent events of this shooting, and believes investigators were on the right path and are quote-unquote going to apprehend this person. They were able to trace the suspect's escape route through Central Park, and since there's no cameras there in Central Park, he was able to make his escape somewhere in Manhattan. That is why they have been unable to trace the suspect's whereabouts after he went west and disappeared in the Central Park. But police have said that the suspect has dropped a water bottle that had a fingerprint on it. Unfortunately, they were unable to recover anything from that fingerprint because it was so smudged, and the police are considering him very lucky, and they keep saying that he was lucky because they were not able to retrieve his fingerprint from that water bottle. Investigators also found a cell phone near the scene, and they are assuming it's the suspect's cell phone or it's a burner phone that the suspect was using. They believe it to see it as some sort of a distraction that he was using, but it's not unsure. They still cannot access the phone that was left behind at the scene. Also, according to 2 law officials, the shell casings that were left behind is considered a clue from the suspect because both bullets are carved with one saying delay and another saying deny. They are making a pinpoint connection and linking it to a book that is called Delay, Deny, Defend by J.M. Femin. This book talks about health insurance avoiding paying patient claims. Police are speculating that the suspect was either a former employee or he was a client of the United Healthcare Insurance. Investigators are also looking into a gun purchase in Connecticut that looks very similar to the gun that the suspect had used. The suspect had waited for Thompson to come out of the door that Thompson was planning on using. The suspect had waited 10 minutes waiting for Johnson, and he ignored every passerby until Thompson came out of the doors that he was supposed to come out of. The suspect approached from behind and shot him 3 times, but it is said that he used a silencer. Thompson took some steps and then fell onto the sidewalk and laid against the wall. The suspect slowly walked up to Thompson and pointed the gun and just simply walked away, and as he was crossing the street, he began running. That's when he took the bus and headed to Central Park to make his quote-unquote escape route, according to police. Now, speaking a little bit about Thompson, according to the New York Times article that I found, Thompson owes about $20 million of United Health Group shares as of late September. He had also gotten bomb threats targeting his house only 12 hours after the shooting. Thompson was also receiving many threats at the time, and prior he left to Manhattan, the police had investigated it but found that it led to nothing. After his death, a lot of criticism arose and leveled against insurance companies over claim denials, mainly United Healthcare. Overall, in my personal opinion, this current event is something so unreal. How do you explain a gunman who killed a CEO of an insurance company and they just essentially disappear and they cannot be traced anywhere? Overall, couldn't get more information about this event since it just happened like 4 days ago. But I hope they figure out what his true motives were, besides linking his motive to the book that I had mentioned earlier. Well, that's the end of this episode. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day.